From the White House in Washington, D.C., we bring you now an address by the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. The President, speaking from his office, will discuss the Berlin crisis, its causes, its effects, and what the United States will propose to do about it. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening. 7 weeks ago tonight, I returned from Europe to report on my meeting with Premier Khrushchev and the others. His grim warnings about the future of the world, his aide memoir on Berlin, the subsequent speeches and threats which he and his agents have launched, and the increase in the Soviet military budget that he has announced, have all prompted a series of decisions by the administration and a series of consultations with the members of the NATO organization. In Berlin, as you recall, he intends to bring to an end, through a stroke of the pen, first, our legal rights to be in West Berlin, and secondly, our ability to make good on our commitments to 2 million people of that city. That we cannot permit. We are clear about what must be done, and we intend to do it. I want to talk frankly with you tonight about the first steps that we shall take. These actions will require sacrifice on the part of many of our citizens. More will be required in the future. They will require from all of us courage and perseverance in the years to come. But if we and our allies act out of strength and unity of purpose, with calm determination and steady nerves, using restraint in our words as well as our weapons, I am hopeful that both peace and freedom will be sustained. The immediate threat to free men is in West Berlin, but that isolated outpost is not an isolated problem. The threat is worldwide. Our efforts must be equally wide and strong, and not be obsessed by any single manufactured crisis. We face a challenge in Berlin, but there is also a challenge in Southeast Asia, where the borders are less guarded, the enemy harder to find, and the dangers of communism less apparent to those who have so little. We face a challenge in our own hemisphere, and indeed wherever else the freedom of human beings is at stake. Let me remind you that the fortunes of war and diplomacy left the free people of West Berlin in 1945 110 miles behind the Iron Curtain. This map makes very clear the problems that we face. The white is West Germany, the east is the area controlled by the Soviet Union, and as you can see from the chart, West Berlin is 110 miles within the area which the Soviets now dominate, which is immediately controlled by the so-called East German regime. We are there as a result of our victory over Nazi Germany, and our basic rights to be there, deriving from that victory, include both our presence in West Berlin and the enjoyment of access across East Germany. These rights have been repeatedly confirmed and recognized in special agreements with the Soviet Union. Berlin is not a part of East Germany, but a separate territory under the control of the Allied powers. Thus, our rights there are clear and deep-rooted. But in addition to those rights is our commitment to sustain and defend, if need be, the opportunity for more than 2 million people to determine their own future and choose their own way of life. Thus, our presence in West Berlin and our access thereto cannot be ended by any act of the Soviet government. The NATO shield was long ago extended to cover West Berlin, and we have given our word that an attack upon that city will be regarded as an attack upon us all. For West Berlin lying exposed 110 miles inside East Germany, surrounded by Soviet troops and close to Soviet supply lines, has many roles. It is more than a showcase of liberty, a symbol, an island of freedom in a communist sea. It is even more than a link with the free world, a beacon of hope behind the Iron Curtain, an escape hatch for refugees. West Berlin is all of that. But above all, it has now become, as never before, the great testing place of Western courage and will, a focal point where our solemn commitments, stretching back over the years since 1945, and Soviet ambitions now meet in basic confrontation. It would be a mistake for others to look upon Berlin because of its location as a tempting target. The United States is there. The United Kingdom and France are there. The pledge of NATO is there. And the people of Berlin are there. It is as secure in that sense as the rest of us, for we cannot separate its safety from our own. I hear it said that West Berlin is militarily untenable, and so was Bastogne, and so in fact was Stalingrad. Any dangerous spot is tenable if men, brave men, will make it so. We do not want to fight, but we have fought before, and others in earlier times have made the same dangerous mistake of assuming that the West was too selfish and too soft and too divided to resist invasions of freedom in other lands. Those who threaten to unleash the forces of war on a dispute over West Berlin should recall the words of the ancient philosopher, "A man who causes fear cannot be free from fear." We cannot and will not permit the communists to drive us out of Berlin, either gradually or by force. For if the fulfillment of our pledge to that city, our pledge to that city is essential to the morale and security of West Germany, to the unity of the entire free world. Soviet strategy has long been aimed not merely at Berlin, but at dividing and neutralizing all of Europe, forcing us back on our own shores. We must meet our often stated pledge to the free peoples of West Berlin and maintain our rights and their safety, even in the face of force, in order to maintain the confidence of other free peoples in our word and our resolve. The strength of the alliance on which our security depends is dependent in turn on our willingness to meet our commitments to them. So long as the communists insist that they are preparing to end by themselves, unilaterally, our rights in West Berlin and our commitments to its people, we must be prepared to defend those rights and those commitments. We will at all times be ready to talk, if talk will help. But we must also be ready to resist with force, if force is used upon us. Either alone would fail. Together they can serve the cause of freedom and peace. The new preparations that we shall make to defend the peace are part of the long-term build-up in our strength, which has been underway since January. They are based on our needs to meet a worldwide threat, on a basis which stretches far beyond the present Berlin crisis. Our primary purpose is neither propaganda nor provocation, but preparation. A first need is to hasten progress towards the military goals which the North Atlantic allies have set for themselves. In Europe today, nothing less will suffice. We will put even greater resources into fulfilling these goals, and we look to our allies to do the same. The supplemental defense buildups that I asked from the Congress in March and May have already started moving us towards these and our other defense goals. They included an increase in the size of the Marine Corps, improved readiness of our reserves, expansion of our air and sea lift, and stepped up procurement of needed weapons, ammunition, and other items. To ensure a continuing invulnerable capacity to deter or destroy any aggressor, they provided for the strengthening of our missile power and for putting 50% of our B-52s and B-47s bombers on a ground alert, which would send them on their way with 15 minutes warning. These measures must be speeded up, and still others must now be taken. We must have sea and air lift capable of moving our forces quickly and in large numbers to any part of the world. But even more importantly, we need the capability of placing in any critical area at the appropriate time a force which, combined with those of our allies, is large enough to make clear our determination and our ability to defend our rights at all costs and to meet all levels of aggressive pressure with whatever levels of force are required. We intend to have a wider choice than humiliation or all-out nuclear action. While it is unwise at this time either to call up or send abroad excessive number of these troops before they are needed, let me make it clear that I intend to take, as time goes on, whatever steps are necessary to make certain that such forces can be deployed at the appropriate time without lessening our ability to meet our commitments elsewhere. Thus, in the days and months ahead, I shall not hesitate to ask the Congress for additional measures or exercise any of the executive powers that I possess to meet this threat to peace. Everything essential to the security of freedom must be done, and if that should require more men or more taxes or more controls or other new powers, I shall not hesitate to ask them. The measures proposed today will be constantly studied and altered as necessary. But while we will not let panic shape our policy, neither will we permit timidity to direct our program, and accordingly I am now taking the following steps. I am tomorrow requesting the Congress for the current fiscal year an additional $3,247 million of appropriations for the armed forces to fill out our present Army divisions and to make more men available for prompt deployment. I am requesting an increase in the Army's total authorized strength from 875,000 to approximately 1 million men. 3, I am requesting an increase of 29,000 and 63,000 men respectively in the active duty strength of the Navy and the Air Force. 4, to fulfill these manpower needs, I am ordering that our draft calls be doubled and tripled in the coming months. I am asking the Congress for authority to order to active duty certain ready reserve units and individual reservists, and to extend tours of duty. And under that authority, I am planning to order to active duty a number of air transport squadrons and Air National Guard tactical air squadrons to give us the airlift capacity and protection that we need. Other reserve forces will be called up when needed. 5, many ships and planes once headed for retirement are to be retained or reactivated, increasing our air power tactically and our sea lift, airlift, and anti-submarine warfare capability. In addition, our strategic air power will be increased by delaying the deactivation of B-47 bombers. 6, finally, some $1.8 billion, about half of the total sum, is needed for the procurement of non-nuclear weapons, ammunition, and equipment. The details on all these requests will be presented to the Congress tomorrow. Subsequent steps will be taken to suit subsequent needs. Comparable efforts for the common defense are being discussed with our NATO allies, for their commitment and interest are as precise as our own. And let me add that I am well aware of the fact that many American families will bear the burden of these requests. Studies or careers will be interrupted. Husbands and sons will be called away. Incomes in some cases will be reduced. But these are burdens which must be borne if freedom is to be defended. Americans have willingly borne them before, and they will not flinch from the task now. We have another sober responsibility: to recognize the possibilities of nuclear war in the missile age without our citizens knowing what they should do and where they should go if bombs begin to fall would be a failure of responsibility. In May, I pledged a new start on civil defense. Last week, I assigned, on the recommendation of the Civil Defense Director, basic responsibility for this program to the Secretary of Defense to make certain it is administered and coordinated with our continental defense efforts at the highest civilian level. Tomorrow, I am requesting of the Congress new funds for the following immediate objectives: to identify and mark space in existing structures, public and private, that could be used for fallout shelters in case of attack, to stock those shelters with food, water, first aid kits, and other minimum essentials for our survival, to increase their capacity, to improve our air raid warning and fallout detection systems, including a new household warning system which is now under development, and to take other measures that will be effective at an early date to save millions of lives if needed. In the event of an attack, the lives of those families which are not hit in a nuclear blast and fire can still be saved if they can be warned to take shelter and if that shelter is available. We owe that kind of insurance to our families and to our country. In contrast to our friends in Europe, the need for this kind of protection is new to our shores, but the time to start is now. In the coming months, I hope to let every citizen know what steps he can take without delay to protect his family in case of attack. I know that you will want to do no less. The addition of $277 million civil defense appropriations brings our total new defense budget request to $3,454 million and a total of $47,500 million for the year. This is an increase in the defense budget of $6 billion since January and has resulted in official estimates of a budget deficit of over $5 billion. The Secretary of the Treasury and other economic advisors assure me, however, that our economy has the capacity to bear this new request. We are recovering strongly from this year's recession. The increase in this last quarter of our year of our total national output was greater than that for any post-war period of initial recovery. And yet wholesale prices are actually lower than they were during the recession, and consumer prices are only 1/4% higher than they were last October. In fact, this last quarter was the first in 8 years in which our production has increased without an increase in the overall price index. And for the first time since the fall of 1959, our gold position has improved and the dollar is more respected abroad. These gains, it should be stressed, are being accomplished with budget deficits far smaller than those of the 1958 recession. This improved business outlook means improved revenues, and I intend to submit to the Congress in January a budget for the next fiscal year which will be strictly in balance. Nevertheless, should an increase in taxes be needed because of events in the next few months to achieve that balance, or because of subsequent defense rises, those increased taxes will be requested in January. Meanwhile, to help make certain that the current deficit is held to a safe level, we must keep down all expenditures not thoroughly justified in budget requests. The luxury of our current post office deficit must be ended. Costs in military procurement will be closely scrutinized. And in this effort, I welcome the cooperation of the Congress. The tax loopholes I have specified on expense accounts, overseas income, dividends, interest, cooperatives, and others must be closed. I recognize that no public revenue measure is welcomed by everyone, but I am certain that every American wants to pay his fair share and not leave the burden of defending freedom entirely to those who bear arms. For we have mortgaged our very future on this defense, and we cannot fail to meet our responsibilities. But I must emphasize again that the choice is not merely between resistance and retreat, between atomic holocaust and surrender. Our peacetime military posture is traditionally defensive, but our diplomatic posture need not be. Our response to the Berlin crisis will not be merely military or negative. It will be more than merely standing firm, for we do not intend to leave it to others to choose and monopolize the forum and the framework of discussion. We do not intend to abandon our duty to mankind to seek a peaceful solution. As signers of the UN Charter, we shall always be prepared to discuss international problems with any and all nations that are willing to talk and listen with reason. If they have proposals, not demands, we shall hear them. If they seek genuine understanding, not concessions of our rights, we shall meet with them. We have previously indicated our readiness to remove any actual irritants in West Berlin. But the freedom of that city is not negotiable. We cannot negotiate with those who say, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is negotiable. But we are willing to consider any arrangement or treaty in Germany consistent with the maintenance of peace and freedom and with the legitimate security interests of all nations. We recognize the Soviet Union's historical concern about their security in Central and Eastern Europe after a series of ravaging invasions. And we believe arrangements can be worked out which will help to meet those concerns and make it possible for both security and freedom to exist in this troubled area. For it is not the freedom of West Berlin which is abnormal in Germany today, but the situation in that entire divided country. If anyone doubts the legality of our rights in Berlin, we are ready to have it submitted to international adjudication. If anyone doubts the extent to which our presence is desired by the people of West Berlin compared to East German feelings about their regime, we are ready to have that question submitted to a free vote in Berlin, and if possible, among all the German people. And let us hear at the same time from 2.5 million refugees who have fled the communist regime in East Germany, voting for Western-type freedom with their feet. The world is not deceived by the communist attempt to label Berlin as a hotbed of war. There is peace in Berlin today. The source of world trouble and tension is Moscow, not Berlin. And if war begins, it will have begun in Moscow and not Berlin. For the choice of peace or war is largely theirs, not ours. It is the Soviets who have stirred up this crisis. It is they who are trying to force a change. It is they who have opposed free elections. It is they who have rejected an all-German peace treaty and the rulings of international law. And as Americans know from our history, on our own old frontier, gun battles are caused by outlaws and not by officers of the peace. In short, while we are ready to defend our interests, we shall also be ready to search for peace in quiet, exploratory talks, in formal or informal meetings. We do not want military considerations to dominate the thinking of either East or West. And Mr. Khrushchev may find that his invitation to other nations to join in a meaningless treaty may lead to their inviting him to join in the community of peaceful men, in abandoning the use of force, and in respecting the sanctity of agreements. While all of these efforts go on, we must not be diverted from our total responsibilities, from other dangers, from other tasks. If new threats in Berlin or elsewhere should cause us to weaken our program of assistance to the developing nations, who are also under heavy pressure from the same source, or to hold our efforts for realistic disarmament, or to disrupt or slow down our economy, or to neglect the education of our children, then those threats will surely be the most successful and least costly maneuver in communist history. For we can afford all these efforts and more, but we cannot afford not to meet this challenge. And the challenge is not to us alone. It is a challenge to every nation which asserts its sovereignty under a system of liberty. It is a challenge to all those who want a world of free choice. It is a special challenge to the Atlantic community, the heartland of human freedom. We in the West must move together in building military strength. We must consult one another more closely than ever before. We must together design our proposals for peace and labor together as they are pressed at the conference table. And together we must share the burdens and the risks of this effort. The Atlantic community as we know it has been built in response to challenges. The challenge of European chaos in 1947, of the Berlin blockade in 1948, and the challenge of communist aggression in Korea in 1950. Now standing strong and prosperous after an unprecedented decade of progress, the Atlantic community will not forget either its history or the principles which gave it meaning. The solemn vow we each of us gave to West Berlin in time of peace will not be broken in time of danger. If we do not meet our commitments to Berlin, where will we later stand? If we are not true to our word there, all that we have achieved in collective security, which relies on these words, will mean nothing. And if there is one path above all others to war, it is the path of weakness and disunity. Today, the endangered frontier of freedom runs through divided Berlin. We want it to remain a frontier of peace. This is the hope of every citizen of the Atlantic community, every citizen of Eastern Europe, and I'm confident every citizen of the Soviet Union. For I cannot believe that the Russian people, who bravely suffered enormous losses in the Second World War, would now wish to see the peace upset once more in Germany. The Soviet government alone can convert Berlin's frontier of peace into a pretext of war. The steps I have indicated tonight are aimed at avoiding that war. To sum it all up, we seek peace, but we shall not surrender. That is the central meaning of this crisis and the meaning of this government's policy. With your help and the help of other free men, this crisis can be surmounted. Freedom can prevail, and peace can endure. I would like to close with a personal word. When I ran for the presidency of the United States, I knew that this country faced serious challenges. But I could not realize, nor could any man realize who does not bear the burdens of this office, how heavy and constant would be those burdens. 3 times in my lifetime, our country and Europe have been involved in major wars. In each case, serious misjudgments were made on both sides of the intentions of others, which brought about great devastation. Now, in the thermonuclear age, any misjudgment on either side about the intentions of the other could rain more devastation in several hours than has been wrought in all the wars of human history. Therefore, I, as President and Commander-in-Chief, and all of us as Americans, are moving through serious days. I shall bear this responsibility under our Constitution for the next 3½ years. But I'm sure that we all, regardless of our occupations, will do our very best for our country and for our cause. For all of us want to see our children grow up in a country at peace and in a world where freedom endures. I know that sometimes we get impatient. We wish for some immediate action that would end our perils. But I must tell you that there is no quick and easy solution. The communists control over 1 billion people, and they recognize that if we should falter, their success would be imminent. We must look to long days ahead, which, if we are courageous and persevering, can bring us what we all desire. In these days and weeks, I ask for your help and your advice. I ask for your suggestions when you think we could do better. All of us, I know, love our country, and we shall all do our best to serve it. In meeting my responsibilities in these coming months as President, I need your goodwill and your support, and above all, your prayers. Thank you, and good night.
From his office in the White House, we have presented an address by the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. This special program has come to you from Washington, D.C.
This is the CBS Television Network.